Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. The Sultan's eyes glinted like polished onyx as he surveyed the row of women before him. 15 of them stood with heads bowed in the grand reception hall of Topkapi Palace, each more beautiful than the last. Draped in silks and adorned with jewels that caught the afternoon light streaming through the latticed windows, they represented the finest selection from across the Ottoman Empire. Yet his gaze lingered on only one. Her, he said quietly to his Kisler Agassi, the chief black eunuch who managed the imperial harem, the one with eyes the color of the Aegean. The year was 1856, and Sultan Daoud Fazl, 34th sovereign of the House of Osman, had just chosen another concubine for his harem. The Ottoman Empire was changing, reforming under the Tanzimat edicts, but some traditions remained unaltered. The Sultan's right to populate his harem with the empire's most beautiful women was one such tradition. The chosen woman, Ginevra Levent, daughter of a Venetian merchant and a Greek mother, raised her eyes briefly before remembering her place. She was 22, educated, and had never expected to find herself here, standing before the most powerful man in the empire. When her father's trading house had collapsed under debt, the Ottoman court had presented an unexpected solution to her family's misfortune. "You have chosen well, Your Majesty," murmured Hussein Aga, the aged eunuch who had served 3 sultans before Daoud. "The Venetian-Greek has unusual qualities. She speaks 4 languages and was educated in Paris." Sultan Daoud nodded absently, already turning away. Court matters awaited him: diplomatic tensions with Russia, pressure from Britain and France, and the ever-present challenge of modernizing an empire that stretched from the Balkans to the Persian Gulf. A new concubine was merely a momentary diversion. "See that she is properly instructed in harem protocol," he said, his voice betraying no particular interest beyond the initial selection. "I will send for her when time permits." As the Sultan departed, Ginevra stared at the intricate mosaic floor, her heart pounding. The other women, some relieved, others disappointed, were led away by attendants. Ginevra alone remained, waiting for her instructions. "You are fortunate," said an older woman in flowing robes who approached her. "I am Safi Kaden, first assistant to the Valide Sultan. You will address me as Kalfa. Come, I will show you to your quarters." Ginevra followed silently, her silk slippers whispering against marble floors as they passed through a series of courtyards and corridors. The harem was a city within a city, a labyrinth of rooms housing hundreds of women, concubines, servants, and the Sultan's female relatives. "You must understand your position," Safi said as they walked. "You are now an odalisque, the lowest rank among the concubines. You will be educated in Ottoman customs, music, poetry, and the art of pleasing the Sultan. If he favors you with his attention and you bear him a son, you may rise to the rank of Iqbal or even Kaden." Ginevra nodded, though the words meant little to her then. What she understood was that her life was no longer her own. The palace walls, though gilded and beautiful, were still walls. Her quarters were small but luxurious: a curtained bed, silk cushions, a copper basin for washing, and a window that overlooked a courtyard garden. Safi showed her the hammam where she would bathe, the dining hall where meals were taken, and the various rooms where concubines spent their days in supervised activities. "The Sultan rarely visits new concubines immediately," Safi said with practiced detachment. "Use this time to learn. The Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, will want to meet you soon. She oversees the harem and holds your fate in her hands as surely as the Sultan does." That night, alone in her new quarters, Ginevra wept silently into embroidered pillows. She thought of Venice, of the Grand Canal at sunset, of her mother's garden in Athens. She thought of the books she had loved, the music she had played, the future she had imagined for herself, perhaps as a teacher or the wife of a merchant like her father. Never had she envisioned this gilded cage. "I will survive this," she whispered to herself in Venetian dialect, taking comfort in her mother tongue. "I will find a way to live." Days passed, then weeks. Ginevra learned the complex hierarchy of the harem, the supreme position of the Valide Sultan, the Kadens, who were the official consorts, the Iqbals, who were favored concubines, and the numerous odalisques like herself. She learned Ottoman Turkish, improved her Arabic, and studied the poetry that was prized at court. She learned to dance in the Ottoman style, to play the canon, and to recite verses from great poets. The Valide Sultan, Fatima Hasiki, was a formidable woman in her 60s who had weathered the treacherous waters of harem politics for decades. When she finally summoned Ginevra for an audience, the young woman approached with trepidation. "So you are the Venetian," the Valide Sultan said, studying Ginevra through shrewd eyes. "They say you are educated, that you speak languages and read books." "Yes, Valide Sultan," Ginevra replied, keeping her eyes lowered as she had been taught. "Look at me," the older woman commanded. Ginevra raised her eyes, meeting the Valide Sultan's gaze directly. "Good. You have spirit. Too many come here with their spirits already broken." The Valide Sultan gestured to a cushion. "Sit. Tell me about your education." For the next hour, Ginevra spoke of her unusual upbringing, how her merchant father had insisted she learn languages for trade, how her Greek mother had taught her music and literature, how she had spent 2 years at a progressive school in Paris where young women studied mathematics and natural philosophy alongside traditional feminine arts. The Valide Sultan listened with unexpected interest. "My son is an educated man," she said finally. "He reads European books and speaks of reform and modernization. Perhaps you will interest him beyond the bedchamber." She paused, considering. "Or perhaps that will make you dangerous. We shall see." 2 months after her arrival, Ginevra received the summons. The Sultan would see her that night. She was bathed in rose water, her skin rubbed with almond oil, her hair arranged in an elaborate style adorned with pearl pins. She was dressed in robes of pale blue silk that complemented her unusual eyes, and delicate gold jewelry was fastened around her wrists and throat. "Remember your training," Safi instructed as attendants made final adjustments to Ginevra's appearance. "Be modest but not timid. Speak when spoken to. Please him in all things." Ginevra was escorted through corridors she had never seen before, deeper into the private quarters of the palace. Her heart raced, fear and resignation mingling in her chest. This was her duty now, the purpose for which she had been chosen. Whatever happened this night would determine her future in the harem. The Sultan's chamber was spacious and elegant, lit by silver lamps that cast a warm glow over carved wooden screens, plush divans, and walls adorned with calligraphy. Sultan Daoud himself stood by a window, gazing out at the moonlit Bosphorus. He turned as she entered, and Ginevra was struck again by his appearance, taller than most Ottoman men, with a trimmed beard framing a face that betrayed both authority and intellect. "Ginevra Levent," he said, pronouncing her name with its proper Venetian inflection. "You may approach." She moved forward and performed the deep curtsy she had practiced, lowering her eyes. "They tell me you speak French," he said, switching to that language. "Oui, votre majesté," she replied, surprised. "And Italian, Greek, and now Ottoman Turkish," he continued, returning to Turkish. "An unusual education for a woman. My father believed knowledge was valuable regardless of one's sex, your majesty." A slight smile touched the Sultan's lips. A progressive view, one that is not widely shared, even in Europe. He gestured to a low table set with fruit, sweetmeats, and 2 glasses of sherbet. "Sit. You need not fear me tonight. I wish only to converse." Confused but relieved, Ginevra took her place on a cushion near the table. The Sultan seated himself across from her, studying her with those intense dark eyes. "Tell me," he said, "what do you think of my empire?" It was not a question she had been prepared for. Ginevra hesitated, weighing her response carefully. "I think it stands at a crossroads, your majesty, between tradition and transformation." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Explain." "The Tanzimat reforms seek to modernize the empire, to adopt European administrative systems while preserving Ottoman sovereignty. It is a difficult balance, embracing necessary change without losing what makes the empire unique." For the next 2 hours, they spoke of politics, literature, and philosophy. The Sultan asked her opinions on European governments, on educational systems, on the poetry of Fuseli and Baki. He seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, debating points respectfully when they disagreed. Not once did he touch her. When the night grew late, he simply thanked her for the conversation and had her escorted back to her quarters. Ginevra lay awake until dawn, puzzling over the encounter. Had she failed in some way? Had he found her unattractive? Or was this some test of her intellect before he decided whether to bed her? The pattern repeated itself over the following weeks. Every few days, she would be summoned to the Sultan's chambers in the evening. They would converse for hours, sometimes in Turkish, sometimes in French, about matters ranging from diplomatic relations with European powers to the philosophical works of Ibn Khaldun and Rousseau. Occasionally, he would read poetry to her or ask her to play the canon. But he never approached her as a man approaches a concubine. The harem buzzed with speculation. Some whispered that the Sultan found her lacking. Others suggested more sinister reasons for his restraint. Safai warned her that such unusual treatment could breed dangerous jealousy among the other concubines. "You walk a precarious path," the older woman cautioned. "The Sultan's attention, even if not carnal, marks you. There are those who would see you fall simply for being noticed." Indeed, Ginevra soon felt the chill of resentment from women who had been in the harem far longer without receiving such regular summons. Nasreen, a beautiful Circassian who had been in Iqbal for 3 years, was particularly venomous. "He pities you," she told Ginevra one day in the garden. "The poor European who doesn't know how to please a man. He treats you like a curious pet, nothing more." Ginevra had learned enough of harem politics to recognize the fear beneath Nasreen's cruelty. Any shift in the Sultan's attention could alter the delicate balance of power among the women. After nearly 3 months of these unusual meetings, Ginevra found herself again in the Sultan's chambers on a warm spring evening. They had been discussing the recent diplomatic tensions with Russia when Daoud suddenly changed the subject. "You never ask why I summon you only to talk," he said, watching her closely. Ginevra met his gaze steadily. "It is not my place to question your Majesty's wishes. Perhaps not as an odalisque, but I am asking you now, as Ginevra Levent, what you think of our arrangements." She took a deep breath. I think you are lonely, Your Majesty." The words hung in the air between them. For a moment, she feared she had overstepped, but then she saw something shift in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a vulnerability quickly masked. "You are perceptive," he said quietly. "I am surrounded by people at all times. Ministers, advisors, servants, concubines. Yet few speak to me as a man rather than as Sultan. And is that what you wish? For me to see the man, not the Sultan? Perhaps." He rose and walked to the window, his back to her. "I did not choose this life, Ginevra. I was born to it, trained for it. And when my brother died without an heir, I inherited an empire in decline. I have dedicated myself to its preservation and modernization, but the weight of centuries rests on my shoulders." Ginevra remained silent, sensing he needed to speak more than he needed a response. "I selected you for your beauty, like all the others," he continued. "But when I learned of your education, I became curious. I wondered if you might understand the world I am trying to create, an Ottoman Empire that preserves its soul while embracing necessary change." He turned to face her again. "And I have found that you do understand better than most of my ministers. You speak with intelligence and insight, without flattery or fear. That is rare in my world." "Your Majesty honors me," she said softly. "Daoud," he said, "when we are alone, I would hear my name sometimes." That night marked a shift in their relationship. Though still proper in his behavior, the Sultan began to speak more personally, sharing memories of his childhood, his hopes for the empire, his frustrations with conservative elements at court. Ginevra, in turn, spoke of her family, her education, her dreams before coming to the palace. Weeks passed, and spring turned to summer. Their conversations continued, but now they sometimes walked together in the private imperial gardens or sat side by side as she played music for him. Occasionally, his hand would brush hers, or he would touch her shoulder lightly while making a point. Each contact sent a current through her that she tried to ignore. She was developing feelings for him, not for the Sultan, but for Daoud the man. The realization terrified her. To love him was dangerous. To expect love in return, foolish. She was a concubine, one of dozens. Even if he held her in special regard, tradition and politics would never allow anything more meaningful. Meanwhile, her unusual position had made her a target within the harem. Small cruelties multiplied. A torn gown before she was to meet the Sultan, missing jewelry, whispered insults as she passed. The Valide Sultan watched it all with calculating eyes, neither encouraging nor preventing the harassment. One evening, Ginevra arrived at the Sultan's chambers to find him agitated, pacing the room with barely contained energy. The British ambassador demands concessions on trade through the Dardanelles, he said without preamble. The Russians threaten military action if we yield. My own ministers are divided, some favoring the British, others the Russians, all of them looking to their own interests rather than the empire's. What does your majesty think is best? She asked. He stopped pacing and looked at her. I think we must chart our own course, neither bowing to European demands nor isolating ourselves in outdated traditions. But such a path requires strength we may no longer possess. The empire still has strength, Ginevra said firmly. Perhaps not the military might of previous centuries, but other strengths, its position between East and West, its diverse peoples, its rich culture. These can be leveraged in new ways. They talked long into the night, discussing strategies and historical precedents. As the conversation wound down, Daoud moved to sit beside her on the divan. You give me clarity when all seems murky, he said, his voice low. You see paths I had not considered. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as she responded. His hands cradled her face, and hers found their way to his shoulders. When they finally parted, both were breathing quickly. Daoud rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I have wanted to do that for months, he confessed. Why didn't you? I am yours by law and custom. He pulled back to look at her. Because I wanted you to come to me willingly, not out of duty or fear. Because what I feel for you is different from what I have felt for any woman in my harem. That night, for the first time, she stayed until morning. Their lovemaking was tender, unhurried, nothing like the dutiful submission she had been trained to offer. In the quiet darkness, wrapped in his arms, Ginevra allowed herself to hope for something she had never thought possible, a true connection within these palace walls. But morning brought reality crashing back. She returned to the harem to find her quarters ransacked, her few personal possessions, a small portrait of her parents, letters from her mother, destroyed. On her bed lay a crude drawing of a headless woman. Safi found her sitting amidst the destruction, dry-eyed and numb. This has gone too far, the older woman said angrily. We must tell the Valide Sultan. No, Ginevra said. That would only escalate matters. Then the Sultan, especially not him. Ginevra stood, brushing debris from her robes. I will handle this myself. That afternoon, she sought out Nasreen in the garden where the higher-ranking concubines often gathered. The beautiful Circassian sat with two companions, all of whom fell silent as Ginevra approached. I would speak with you privately, Ginevra said to Nasreen. The woman smirked. Whatever you have to say can be said here. Very well. Ginevra drew herself up to her full height. I know you orchestrated the destruction of my quarters. The threat is clear, but ineffective. I am not afraid of you. Nasreen's eyes narrowed. You should be. You are nothing, a foreign novelty that will soon bore him. I have given the Sultan a daughter. What have you given him but conversation? I have given him exactly what he asked of me, Ginevra replied evenly. As have you. We serve at his pleasure, not in competition with each other. Such noble words from the Sultan's newest plaything, Nasreen sneered. Enjoy his attention while it lasts. The harem is full of women who once thought themselves special. Ginevra leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Touch my things again, and I will tell the Sultan who is responsible for his mother's regular reports on his private activities. Nasreen's face paled. It had been a guess based on observations and whispered rumors, but Ginevra saw from the woman's reaction that she had struck true. The Valide Sultan was known to have spies among the concubines, reporting on the Sultan's conversations and relationships to help her maintain control. You know nothing, Nasreen hissed, but there was fear in her eyes now. I know enough, Ginevra replied. Leave me be, and I will do the same for you. She walked away, her heart pounding but her steps steady. It was a dangerous gambit, one that could backfire terribly if Nasreen chose to escalate rather than retreat. But Ginevra had learned that in the harem, perceived weakness invited attack. She could not afford to be seen as powerless. The strategy worked, at least partially. The direct attack stopped, though the whispers and cold shoulders continued. Ginevra found herself increasingly isolated within the harem, tolerated but not welcomed, feared but not respected. Her only solace came in her evenings with the Sultan. Over the following months, their relationship deepened. They still spent hours in conversation, but now those conversations led to intimate embraces, to nights spent in each other's arms. Daoud shared his innermost thoughts with her, his fears for the empire, his hopes for reform, his doubts about his own abilities as a ruler. "My ministers think me too Western," he told her one night as they lay together watching moonlight shift across the ceiling. "The Europeans think me too Oriental. I am caught between worlds, trying to build a bridge that perhaps cannot exist." Ginevra traced the line of his jaw with her fingers. "The bridge exists in you. That is why you can build it in the empire." He captured her hand and kissed the palm. "You see me more clearly than I see myself." As autumn approached, Ginevra realized she was with child. She kept the knowledge to herself at first, uncertain how Daoud would respond. A child would elevate her status in the harem from odalisque to Iqbal if it was a girl, or to Caden if it was a boy. But it would also bind her more tightly to a life she had never chosen. When she finally told him, his reaction surprised her, rather than the distant satisfaction she had expected. After all, he had many children already. He seemed genuinely moved. He placed a hand on her still flat stomach, his expression wondering. "A child," he murmured. "Our child." The possessive plurality of the phrase struck her. Not "my child" as tradition would dictate, the Sultan's child, another heir or princess, but "our child." It was a subtle but significant departure from custom. As her pregnancy progressed, Daoud became increasingly protective and attentive. He had her moved to larger quarters with a view of the Bosphorus. He arranged for the palace's most experienced midwives to attend her. He visited her more frequently, sometimes just to sit quietly while she rested. The Valide Sultan observed these developments with growing concern. One day, she summoned Ginevra to her private chambers. "You have bewitched my son," she said without preamble. "He neglects important matters of state to sit at your bedside. He speaks of you in council meetings. This is unprecedented and dangerous." "I have done nothing to distract His Majesty from his duties," Ginevra replied carefully. "Your existence distracts him." The older woman's eyes were hard as flint. "A sultan may enjoy his concubines, may even favor one above others, but he must never forget who he is." "You make him forget." "With respect, Valide Sultan, I remind him of who he is beyond his title." "That is precisely the problem." The Valide Sultan leaned forward. "Listen carefully, girl. You carry the Sultan's child. That gives you certain rights and protections. But do not overestimate your position. Many before you have fallen from favor despite bearing royal children." The warning was clear, but Ginevra refused to be intimidated. "I seek only to serve His Majesty as he wishes to be served. See that you remember the proper nature of that service." The Valide Sultan waved a dismissive hand. "You are dismissed." As Ginevra's pregnancy entered its final months, political tensions within the empire reached a critical point. Reform-minded ministers clashed with conservative factions. European powers increased pressure for concessions. Nationalist movements stirred in the Balkans. The Sultan was often absent for days, caught in endless meetings and diplomatic negotiations. When he did visit, Daoud looked exhausted, the weight of empire etched in lines around his eyes. Yet with Ginevra, he found moments of peace. He would read to her, or simply hold her as she rested, his hand gentle on her swollen belly. "I wish we could leave this place," he said one evening as they watched the sun set over the Bosphorus. "Take a ship and sail to some quiet corner of the world where I am not sultan and you are not concubine." "And who would we be?" she asked, smiling at the fantasy. "Just Daoud and Ginevra. Perhaps I would be a scholar or a merchant like your father. You could teach languages or play music. And our child would be free to become whatever they wished." He kissed her temple. "A beautiful dream, is it not?" "Beautiful," she agreed, though they both knew it was impossible. He was bound to the empire by birth and duty. She was bound to the harem by law and circumstance. In the early hours of a February morning in 1858, Ginevra gave birth to a son. The labor was difficult but not dangerous, and when the midwife placed the squalling infant in her arms, she felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "He has your eyes," the midwife said, sounding surprised. "The Sultan's coloring, but your eyes." Word was sent immediately to the Sultan, who arrived within the hour despite the early time. When he saw Ginevra holding their child, something shifted in his expression, a deepening, a certainty replacing doubt. "He is perfect," Daoud said, touching the infant's cheek with a gentle finger. "Have you thought of a name?" Names for royal children were traditionally chosen by the Sultan alone, often honoring ancestors or religious figures. That he asked for her input was yet another departure from custom. "I thought perhaps Ibrahim," she suggested tentatively. "After your grandfather." "Ibrahim," Daoud repeated, nodding. "A strong name for a strong son." He stayed far longer than protocol dictated, holding the child, sitting beside Ginevra on the bed, dismissing attendants until they were alone with their newborn son. "I have been thinking," he said finally, his voice low and serious, "about the future, about changes that must be made." "For the empire?" she asked. "For us." He met her eyes directly. "I love you, Ginevra. Not as a sultan loves a favored concubine, but as a man loves the woman who holds his heart." She caught her breath. Such words were unprecedented, dangerous even. "Daoud, let me finish." He took her hand. "I have consulted with my most trusted advisors and religious scholars. There is precedent, though ancient, for what I intend." "What do you intend?" she whispered. "To make you my wife. Not a Khaden, not an Iqbal, but Hasiki Sultan, my official consort and empress." Ginevra stared at him in shock. "That's impossible. The tradition of imperial marriage ended generations ago. No Ottoman sultan has taken an official wife since. Since the 17th century, I know. But the practice was never forbidden by religious law, only set aside in favor of the concubinage system." He squeezed her hand. "I am sultan. I can revive old traditions as well as create new ones. The court will resist. Your mother will adapt, as she has to other changes I have made." His expression was resolute. "It will not be easy. There will be opposition, particularly from conservative factions already suspicious of my reformist tendencies. But I am prepared to weather it." "Why?" she asked, needing to understand. "Why take such a risk?" "Because I need you beside me, not hidden in the harem. Because our son deserves to see his parents united in a bond recognized by law and faith. Because the empire I am trying to build, one that bridges East and West, should be reflected in my own life." He touched her cheek. "And because I love you too much to deny it any longer." Tears filled her eyes. "I love you too. I have for so long." The announcement came 3 weeks later, after careful political preparation. The Sultan would take a wife, elevating the mother of his newborn son from concubine to Hasiki Sultan, Empress consort of the Ottoman Empire. The decision sent shockwaves through the court and beyond. Conservative ulama denounced it as Western-influenced innovation. Reformists cautiously approved it as a sign of modernization. European powers observed with interest, wondering if this presaged further cultural shifts. Within the harem, the reaction was a mixture of disbelief, envy, and fear for what such a change might mean for the established order. The Valide Sultan made her disapproval clear, but stopped short of open opposition. As her son reminded her, Ottoman history provided precedent, even if distant. Sultans from Suleiman the Magnificent to Ibrahim I had taken official wives. The practice had fallen away, not been forbidden. The wedding took place in April 1858, a ceremony blending Ottoman tradition with elements that acknowledged Ginevra's European heritage. She wore a gown of gold-embroidered crimson silk, her hair adorned with diamonds and pearls, a ruby-studded diadem marking her new rank. As she stood beside Daoud, speaking the words that would bind them as husband and wife under both Islamic and international law, Ginevra thought of the frightened woman who had entered the harem less than 2 years earlier. How impossible this moment would have seemed then. The early days of her new position were challenging. As Hasiki Sultan, she was moved from the harem to private apartments connected to the Sultan's quarters. She was given a staff of servants, official duties at court functions, and authority over charitable foundations traditionally managed by the Sultan's consort. Many courtiers were coldly polite at best, openly resentful at worst. Some refused to use her new title, referring to her only as the foreign woman or the Venetian. Others attempted to curry favor, recognizing that her influence with the Sultan was substantial. The harem itself was thrown into disarray by the elevation of a former odalisque to a position above even the Valide Sultan in some ceremonial matters. Nasreen and her allies spread rumors that Ginevra had used foreign magic to enchant the Sultan. Others claimed she was a European spy, sent to influence Ottoman policy. Through it all, Ginevra maintained her dignity and worked to define her unprecedented role. She established schools for girls, patronized artists and musicians, and used her languages to assist in diplomatic relations with European powers. She read state papers alongside Daoud, offering perspectives informed by her unique position between cultures. Slowly, her genuine intelligence and commitment to the empire's welfare earned her respect, if not universal acceptance. The birth of a second son the following year further secured her position, as did the Sultan's unwavering support. The Valide Sultan, recognizing that direct opposition was futile, eventually reached an accommodation with her daughter-in-law. Their relationship remained formal, but developed a grudging mutual respect. "You have changed him," the older woman said to Ginevra one day as they sat together watching little Ibrahim play in the palace gardens. "Not entirely for the worse, I concede." "He has changed me as well," Ginevra replied. "We have changed each other." 5 years after their marriage, as they prepared for a state visit to Paris, the first time an Ottoman sultan would travel to Europe in peacetime, Daoud found Ginevra in their private garden, teaching their sons about the different flowers. "Teaching them botany already?" he asked, smiling as he joined them. "Knowledge is valuable regardless of one's sex," she replied, echoing her father's words from long ago. "Even for little princes." Later, when the children had been taken to their rooms, they walked together in the gathering dusk. The Bosphorus stretched before them, connecting east and west just as their marriage did. "Do you ever regret it?" Ginevra asked suddenly. "Making me your empress? All the controversy, the political complications?" Daoud stopped walking and turned to face her. "Never," he said firmly. "You were chosen for my harem, but I chose you for my heart. Breaking with tradition to make you my empress was the wisest decision of my reign." He drew her into his arms, there in the garden where any servant or guard might see. Another departure from traditional Ottoman reserve. "In you, I found not just love, but partnership," he continued. "You understand both the world we come from and the world we are moving toward. Together, we are building the bridge between them." As the stars appeared above them and the lights of Constantinople twinkled across the water, Ginevra rested her head against her husband's shoulder. From concubine to empress, from captive to partner, her journey had been as unexpected as it was profound. In the heart of an ancient empire struggling to find its place in a changing world, they had forged something revolutionary, a love that transcended tradition, a union that embodied the very transformation they sought for their realm. And in doing so, they had written a new chapter in the long, storied history of the House of Osman.